For a podcast called A Prairie Dawn Companion, we've spent a lot of time talking about characters who aren't Prairie Dawn. But this is a show about more than just Prairie Dawn, obviously. It's about female Muppets, and it's about contextualizing those characters. And while Prairie might be the oldest female Sesame character who still appears somewhat regularly today, it's truly important to realize she's not the oldest out there. That's Betty Lou, obviously. You learned that 2 weeks ago. But if we're talking context, it's essential that we talk about the other female Muppets who appeared in Season 1 before Prairie ever graced our screens. So I'll tell you now, that's what today's episode is going to be about. As I said last week, prepare to hear a lot about Granny, Fanny, Nesselrode. But also, before I could wrap up Season 1, I felt it essential that we talk a little bit about the broader societal context of women on television during this era. And I was wondering, how could Becca learn more? Well, searching around the internet directed me to the book Hearth and Home, Images of Women in the Mass Media, edited by Gay Tuchman, Arlene Kaplan-Daniels, and James Benet. The book is a collection of thorough scientific observations of women on TV and print. Now let me be clear, it's a very dated book, and some of its premises are a little problematic given our modern understanding of gender. But being very dated doesn't exactly surprise me because this book is from 1978. And that means there's really no better source to understand the view of women in the media from roughly the same era as early Sesame Street. So what was television like in the 70s? Well, the book cites the article Sex Role Stereotyping in Children's Television Programs, published in 1975, and notes that men outnumbered women on children's commercial programming over 2-1. And while that's commercial television, not public television, it doesn't seem like PBS was doing much better. The book cites a pretty scathing indictment of the medium from scholar Muriel Cantor, whose research on public television alongside Caroline Isper was funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The text says, Cantor asks, where are the women in public television? Her answer, based on a content analysis of programming, is in front of the television set. Although a higher proportion of adult women appear on children's programming in public television than is true of commercial television, Cantor finds both commercial and public television disseminate the same message about women, although the two types of television differ in their structure and purpose. Television captures societal ideas even when programming is partially divorced from the profit motive. Yeesh. So why does it matter that there were so few female characters in kids' media and public television in the 70s? We said in the first episode that representation matters, but what exactly does that mean? And most importantly, what does any of this have to do with the Answer Lady, a Jim Henson character who doesn't understand that you need to take the cap off of a bottle of ketchup?
Granny.
A few little taps here. Yeah.
Granny, I think if you take the top off the bottle, you'll find that the ketchup will come out.
It will?
Most probably.
That'll make sense in a second. Anyway, I'm Becca Petunia from ToughPigs. This week, tropes, symbolic annihilation, and Granny Fanny Nesselrode, all here on A Prairie Dawn Companion.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Starlight Hotel takes great pride in presenting the world's favorite 6-year-old entertainer, Miss Prairie Dawn.
Come on, girls, girls, girls. Let's go do girl stuff.
Yeah, girl stuff.
One of the main themes of Hearth and Home is the idea of symbolic annihilation, and how that goes hand in hand with a concept called the reflection hypothesis. To quote the text once again, according to the reflection hypothesis, the mass media reflects dominant societal values. To attract audiences whose time and attention are sold to commercial sponsors, the television industry offers programs consonant with American values. Hey, remember how this is a Sesame Street podcast? I'm sorry, I know you'd prefer if the reflection hypothesis had to do with saying wubba 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 to a monster in the mirror. But listen, we'll get to picture books soon, just stay with me. The reflection hypothesis says that if a TV show wants to be popular, which is usually the goal of a TV show, even if Sesame has nobler goals than just commercial success, it needs to portray the world in accordance with mainstream values. So, the world we see on TV can tell us what audiences at the time valued. In the case of Sesame, this is sometimes harder to track. After all, Sesame Street was no stranger to courting controversy. During season 1, which we'll be discussing today, again, don't worry, it's coming, Mississippi banned the show for its positive portrayals of an interracial neighborhood. So yeah, the show wasn't reflecting the values of that particular segment of American society. But as a whole, for our purposes, we can assume that what Sesame portrays women doing is what culture at large expects women to do. It's kind of that simple. Symbolic annihilation is the logical parallel. To quote the book's paraphrase of George Gerbner's work, we may say that representation in the fictional world, such as the 1950s ideal family, symbolizes or signifies social existence. That is, representation in the mass media announces to audience members that this kind of family, or this kind of social characteristic, is valued and approved. Conversely, we may say that either condemnation, trivialization, or absence means symbolic annihilation. In other words, if we're not seeing it on TV, it might as well not exist in society at all. This is especially meaningful when we talk about female characters on television. First of all, the dearth of female characters, remember, boys outnumber girls over 2-1, means women as a whole are trivialized. Secondly, what kinds of women do appear in the media? Those that appear are what society values. Those that don't are effectively annihilated. This is where we get into tropes. Here, I mean common character types across media. Because, after all, tropes are things that are frequently represented, and things that are frequently represented reflect values, and thus are not annihilated. Tropes can change over time, with new things added as culture shifts. But looking at the contemporaneous Hearth and Home, I can highlight a few. So, when discussing women's magazines, researcher Helen Francois found 4 roles for women: single and looking for a husband, housewife mother, spinster, and widowed or divorced, soon to remarry. Furthermore, and related to that, the authors state that women are not important in American society, except perhaps within the home. And that's what we're going to see when we discuss the remaining 2 recurring season 1 female Muppets, Granny Fanny Nesselrode and Roosevelt Franklin's mother. What were kids being taught by them? And of course, we'll take a look at what did and didn't work about them, and why they didn't stick around. Today, I'm going to be joined by ToughPigs pal Kristi O, known for her amazing Muppet art, her labyrinth prop replicas, and the hilarious podcast Bad Princess Movies. Let's go chat with her over in the guest corner.
All right, it's showtime
like I said, my guest today is Kristi O. Kristi, how are you doing today?
Not doing too bad. It is a rainy day up in my part of Canada, but I have armored myself with a cup of hot chocolate. Yeah, so I'm doing okay. I'm cozy.
Hot chocolate. That is not the weather that it is right here in rainy New York. It is not hot chocolate weather here. But I'm so glad you could be here, Kristi. You know, you obviously should be a familiar voice, if not a familiar face, because this is an audio medium, and also you're usually wearing a helmet. But you should be a familiar figure to Tough Pigs listeners. You've done a lot of work with Tough Pigs in the past, although I guess you're not officially part of the Tough Pigs family, but you're like a Care Bear cousin
Aw.
to the Tough Pigs family, I feel like. Um, and why don't you tell us a little bit though about your history, I guess your history with Henson stuff in general, and then we'll get into Sesame in specific. So how should people know you? What's your connection to this fandom? Why did I invite you, besides the fact that you're lovely? Uh,
Aw, thank you. I think first off, what people probably know me best for are one of two things. Either the Muppet Princess Bride illustrations that I like to draw, or my bread and butter, or at least where my heart is, are the Labyrinth proplicas that I like to do. Labyrinth in general, that is my area of expertise within the Henson universe. My fixation, my obsession. Um, so I am slightly out of my depth here because my history with Sesame Street is pretty shallow. I was a 90s kid, so I watched Sesame Street growing up. I remember some of my earliest memories being just watching Sesame Street or playing with some of the merchandise. So I have just the faintest nostalgic love of, characters like Big Bird, obviously, Grover, but the main characters. So it was I'll say it's been interesting right off the bat, you getting me on this show, because it was an opportunity to actually dig into some of the Sesame Street stuff that I probably did not watch enough as a kid to really see these characters that we're going to be talking about today. And even if I did, I certainly do not remember any of them.
Well, that's the interesting thing about, some of the characters we're going to talk about is like, unless you actively sought this stuff out in like the YouTube era or the tape trading era, you wouldn't have seen these characters because they weren't re-airing these sketches. Pretty much past the early 1980s, this stuff did not stick around. These characters, and again, we're going to get into them in a second, but these characters really didn't make it past like season one and season two. We are not seeing any new material with these characters after Sesame's second season. And that's kind of a ridiculous thing because, one of the things that we've been talking so much about is just how few female characters there were on Sesame Street. And, here we have these female characters and they just don't stick around. They existed and then they didn't. But at the same time, the question is like, well, did we need these particular characters? Are we better off without a Granny Fanny Nesselrode? But I guess let's start talking actually about the character of the three we're going to be chatting about. Actually, I should say we're going to be talking about three characters today. Roosevelt Franklin's mother, Granny Fanny Nesselrode, and Franny. And I'll get into those characters because my guess is you listening at home heard Franny and you go, "What is that character?" We'll get into it. But we're going to start with the character of those three who appeared first, which is Roosevelt Franklin's mother. So Roosevelt Franklin's mother first appeared in February 1970, which was the first season of Sesame Street. That is 3 months after Sesame Street began. And of course, Sesame Street being Sesame Street, that was already 68 episodes into the show's run because I don't frankly understand it either. Kristi, how much do you know about Roosevelt Franklin? Is, I guess, the question here. Because I feel like to understand Roosevelt Franklin's mother, we need to understand Roosevelt Franklin. And it's kind of tough to talk about the history of Sesame Street without talking about Roosevelt.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pig feet, but my name is not Peter Piper. It's Roosevelt Franklin, and I live on Sesame Street.
I do know a little bit because I did watch the Street Gang documentary that came out a few years ago, and he was mentioned in there. So I'm not a documentarian on Roosevelt Franklin, but I am aware of who his character was.
Now, as a Canadian, how much do you know about Franklin Roosevelt?
Not very much.
I knew I messed up by inviting you onto this podcast. But no. So what's important to realize about Roosevelt Franklin is while Roosevelt Franklin was not in the first episode of Sesame Street, in fact, I believe his first appearance was February 1970 in this same sketch. Roosevelt Franklin quickly became sort of the show's first breakout star. I guess other than Bert and Ernie, who absolutely would, Ernie would have the first Billboard charting single from Sesame Street and all of these things. But Roosevelt Franklin was an incredibly popular character. And the thing about Roosevelt Franklin is he is basically a little kid. He's a tiny anything Muppet, kind of the same sort of shape as Prairie Dawn or Betty Lou, who we talked about 2 weeks ago. Except he's purple, he's got a stripy shirt, and he is just incredibly cool, is I guess what you can say about Roosevelt Franklin. Roosevelt Franklin was absolutely supposed to be black, even though Roosevelt Franklin is not black in color, he's purple. But he was overdubbed with audio from the then Gordon Matt Robinson. And Roosevelt Franklin was an incredibly popular character. He had the first character-specific Sesame Street album, which is The Year of Roosevelt Franklin. And you might be wondering, well, if he's the first breakout, then why didn't he last? And frankly, there was a lot of controversy around Roosevelt Franklin and particularly Roosevelt's friends in Roosevelt Franklin Elementary, which we were going to talk about in this episode. And then I was like, we are not going to have time because I've got, I don't know, 40 to 50 minutes planned just on Granny Fanny Nesselrode. But the important thing is, because of this sort of pushback, Sesame started pulling back on Roosevelt Franklin stuff. And first there was no new Roosevelt Franklin stuff. And then they eventually stopped rerunning Roosevelt Franklin stuff. In fact, the last sketch with Roosevelt Franklin's mother to be re-aired was in 1987. These clips were not re-shown after 1987. So you were talking about being a 90s kid and not knowing this, and that's why.
Yeah, makes sense.
So Roosevelt Franklin, in a lot of his early sketches, really the first 4 Roosevelt Franklin sketches, he's paired with his mother. So we checked out those 4 sketches. And, Kristi, seeing as you're kind of new to this scene, let's talk about these songs, sketches, whatever you want to call them in general. What did you think of the Roosevelt Franklin sketches?
I mean, they're cute. They're catchy. I can see why he was such a popular character because he is just a fun little kid to watch. And especially the way he's puppeteered, him just bouncing around the screen, so much energy. Like, it's hard not to love him.
Now I wonder where he is. Where is he? Now where is that Roosevelt Franklin?
Somebody call me by my first and last name.
Yes, I called you, and it's about time you got here, too. Now, will you please come on and recite your numbers?
All right, I'll do that. When I do, you know, I'm gonna count them just for you.
Well, we'll see if you know them for sure. I'm not so sure you even know you know.
I know.
Reminds me a lot of my little nephew, especially when he gets particularly rambunctious, and when he's in that mode, there's nothing you can do but just stand back and just watch him run around.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely how he feels. And I love the energy that he sort of brings whenever he's there. I will say, so he is Matt Robinson both on the album and on the show, but on the album his voice is a little higher. I was a little surprised watching these just how deep Roosevelt Franklin's voice is. But Roosevelt Franklin is the star of these sketches. His mother is secondary. And, I don't even know Roosevelt Franklin's mother's name. No one knows Roosevelt Franklin's mother's name.
That's the thing is, so as part of the materials that you assembled for this podcast is you also provided a lot of images from books and other materials that she appeared in. And there's a set of finger puppets, and that really hit home because you have all these other characters with their names underneath the finger puppets, and then you just have Roosevelt Franklin's mom, and that's just how she's referred to. She has no name. It's just her title.
I vaguely remember us talking about on the ToughPigs Discord at one point, like, can we change her Muppet Wiki page to Mrs. Franklin? But we can't even say for certain that she has the same last name as Roosevelt Franklin. We don't know. So I should say Roosevelt Franklin's mother, just like Roosevelt was performed by Matt Robinson, Roosevelt Franklin's mother was performed on the show by Loretta Long, who was Susan. Weirdly, on the album, she's performed by Rosalind Cash, who was basically just a general stage screen actress who didn't really do anything else with the Muppets. And kind of the interesting thing to me about Roosevelt Franklin's mother is that, well, like you said, there isn't that much really to say. And even going into those storybooks that we looked at, and we looked at a couple of different storybooks, Roosevelt Franklin's mother appears in Roosevelt Franklin's mother appears in 8 books from 1971 to 1980. I showed you scans from all of them. And I don't believe she has a line of dialogue in any of them.
No, I don't remember any.
She's there. She's carrying bricks in Grover and the Everything in the Whole World Museum from 1974. She has a livery stable in Tales of Sesame Gulch. She needs her plants watered in the Sesame Street Dictionary. But I really can't say much about her.
No, and it's unfortunate because there's no reason why she couldn't have been a fully fledged character. I guess I'm sure that probably could be said for everybody that you're going to profile on this podcast. But like the little glimpses that you get of her in the sketches with Roosevelt Franklin, like I want to see more. She seems like, again, maybe I'm just drawing comparisons to my own family, but, thinking of my sister and watching her interact with my nephew, that's Roosevelt Franklin's mom is she's kind of gently trying to guide him into, remembering his alphabet, remembering the days of the week, how to spell his own name. It's all stuff that you see moms doing as part of that wonderful process of trying to prepare your child for the world. And yet she's doing it in such a fun way that it's all just a game to him. And that's such a lovely thing to see moms do,
Doesn't an E come right after D?
Yes, and then comes the F and the G.
Roosevelt Franklin, what you say?
After the G comes the H-I-J.
All right, now you're doing pretty good now.
Halfway home, go ahead.
Well, and that's what's so great about her is it really does feel like, and obviously I would have loved to have seen more than 4 songs with her. She's in also an instrumental bit called Hand Clapping Number that I did not ask you to watch, I don't think, because there's nothing to say about it. She shows up in one street scene on Sesame Street where she has no lines. So it's really just this. But one of the things that I really enjoyed is, again, I'm not a mom, but I'm a teacher. And it really does seem like she's trying to meet Roosevelt Franklin on his level. Like, you get the sense that, like, she's got an energetic kid who likes to sing, and that means she's going to be energetic and she's going to sing too,
Mhm. Yeah,
And
exactly. She's encouraging her son and not trying to stifle that energy, just trying to, direct it a little bit so that it's slightly less destructive maybe. And again, I say that because that energy from a small child can be very destructive.
and let me be clear here too. Kristi, you and I are also both white. And
Yes.
Roosevelt Franklin's mother is clearly supposed to be coded as a black character. So is Roosevelt. When we get to talking about Roosevelt's classmates, I'll do the same introduction again because they also seem to be coded as black characters. I'm aware that my knowledge on a lot of the sort of cultural stereotypes and cultural aspects that are being portrayed by Roosevelt Franklin and his mother are going to be limited. And frankly, I would love to loop back to talking about Roosevelt Franklin's mother and his classmates, with a different guest in the future, because I recognize that our sort of knowledge basis is a little small.
Mhm.
But it's interesting that you're pointing out that sort of energy and you're jokingly referring to it as destructiveness, because that was something that a lot of the complaints about Roosevelt Franklin were tied into, were that he and his friends were a little too raucous, a little too
Okay.
a little too loud, and sometimes disrespectful. And I kind of really like, again, I can only speak for myself, that Roosevelt Franklin's mother is again like meeting him there rather than, objecting to it. So that's something that, I would love to discuss more with someone who maybe knows a little more. And I
Mhm.
recognize that, I can read all that I want from all of my different, academic theory books and I can watch every Roosevelt Franklin clip. I'm never gonna understand it, the same way that a black person would. But that idea of Roosevelt Franklin's mother as just a strong mother, I loved this quote, which is from the Sesame Street Unpaved TV special. Loretta Long, who again did the voice for Roosevelt Franklin's mother, said this. What I loved about Jim Henson.
You know what I loved about him? When we were doing Roosevelt Franklin, and he watched me do the voiceover for the mother, and I said, Roosevelt Franklin sure does know his ABCs. And he totally rewired the mother puppet so she could put her hand on her hip.
Oh, really?
I thought that was so cool, that
That's
he
nice.
respected that's what a mother would do.
Yeah.
And you can see it. She always has her hand on her hip. And that is a really neat character touch that you don't really see from any of the other Muppets. Especially like Roosevelt's arms kind of just flail around. I don't even know if he has arm rods. But it's a little fun note. And I think if she has any personality, it's conveyed both through, Loretta Long's wonderful performance and that one silly little choice to pin her arm up like that.
Mhm.
What I do want to mention, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm talking so much, Kristi, but we'll get back to you in a second. But what I do want to mention is, bringing it back to the conversation that I started the episode with, and you weren't there for this, Kristi, so you're gonna have to listen later.
Okay.
Well, we were talking about the 1978 feminist media criticism book Hearth and Home that I was reading to sort of get an understanding of contemporary understanding of media criticism. And there was one we were talking using it a little bit about tropes and the idea that like there's standard things that we see female characters being time and time again. And one of the things mentioned was that there's four roles for adult women. It's single and looking for a husband, housewife slash mother, spinster,
Yes.
and widowed or divorced, soon to remarry. And, Loretta Long was even saying, like, this is what a mother should be. It's interesting that, again, here we have our first adult female character that we've talked about, and she fits so cleanly into one of those four boxes. Another thing worth noting is they went a little deeper later in the book to talk about black characters on TV. And they note that at least situation comedies, they didn't do a specific breakdown on black characters in children's media. I was looking for it, but it wasn't in this book. But on situation comedies, they noticed that black women are usually restricted to the family sphere. When black women appear in plots, they're usually involved in the family. And again, that's exactly what we see with Roosevelt Franklin here.
Mm-hmm.
That they also mention that that's the space where black women were portrayed as having power, was when dealing with their own family. And she does kind of have a sense of dominance in that family structure. It's just interesting that she falls so cleanly into all of these things that this book is saying is like the stereotypical character.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, again, it's even in her name. She's just Roosevelt Franklin's mom. That's the extent of her character. It's what defines her.
That's it. We never see her without Roosevelt Franklin.
No, and surely, and again, we're imagining there's got to be stuff that she's doing when he's at school, or, what are her own hobbies? What does Roosevelt Franklin's mom do in her downtime?
I think it's time that someone who's more qualified to talk about this than me writes an amazing fanfic about Roosevelt Franklin's mother. But for now, you have anything else to say about her? Or can we move on to a very bizarre character?
I'm okay to move on.
So let's talk about Granny Fanny Nesselrode, a character who first appeared 2 months after Roosevelt Franklin's mother in April 1970, specifically in the 112th episode of Sesame Street, because they just kept going with these, Kristi.
I feel like there had to be a period of time where Jim Henson just legitimately did not sleep.
It's possible. We hear that he knocked out mostly the inserts on Sesame Street, and he would like come in for a week and just do like a week straight of these inserts. Because that's the thing about Sesame Street is you've got these like two separate types of scenes. You have the sort of comedy or song inserts where we're like in different places, which is usually just a blank space in front of a brick wall. Or, versus like the actual scenes on the set of Sesame Street. And these sketches would be the things that would get rerun and repeated in so many episodes. Unfortunately for Granny Fanny Nesselrode, the Answer Lady sketches only got repeated from 1970 to 1972.
Okay, yeah, so yet another character that I, as a 90s kid, I would not have seen hide nor hair of Granny Fanny.
Well, you might have, because the one time she's with Guy Smiley in Here Is Your Life did re-air until 1992, but that was the only one of her sketches that made it past Sesame's 3rd season.
I can still remember Oak Tree when he was just a little acorn.
Oh, no. That's not...
Yes, that's the person who planted you in the ground when you were just an acorn, all the way from the farmhouse down the road, Granny Fanny Nesselrode.
Oh, Granny, it's so nice to see.
And it's not even one that she was like the main focus of.
Correct. She has like no character in that one, as opposed to the others, which I gotta say, Granny has a strong character. I know what Granny Fanny's deal is. Kristi, let's talk generally about Granny, and then we'll get into some of the specific episodes, and I'm sure I'll have media criticism stuff to say about her, because I know myself.
Yeah.
But what's the deal with Granny Fanny Nesselrode? Can you tell the audience who probably also doesn't know this character?
So, Granny Fanny, so, okay, part of this, I think I was starting to headcanon a little bit with Granny Fanny.
I love
but
it. I'm ready.
She appears to just be this little old lady who probably would prefer to be left to her own devices, but for some reason, a strange announcer keeps coming into her home and asking her questions on how to do things. And Granny, being ever so helpful, does her best to come up with a solution for the problem, only for her solution to be either create a new problem or just completely cause a new issue.
Aren't you just sweetie pies for coming to visit your old Granny Fanny?
And do you have a household hint for us today, Granny?
Oh, I don't know, do I?
Yes, you do.
Oh, I do. Of course, you're
Yes.
right. I'm sorry, young fella. I just remembered.
I think that's good. I do question that it feels like Granny wants to be doing this. I don't think it's completely being forced on her by weird-voiced Guy Smiley.
Those early, like the earliest two sketches that you gave me, that's, I think, where I kind of get the impression that she's maybe... this isn't quite what she set out to do with her day, because she always kind of seems a little surprised that she's being tasked with a new problem to try and solve.
That is fair. And let's talk a little bit about those first two sketches. So there's a real distinction. There's only 6 Answer Lady sketches, but those first two are distinctly different because they use older puppets than the later ones. So in the first 2 sketches, Jim Henson plays the Answer Lady, Granny Fanny Nesselrode, which is a little odd because that means Frank Oz plays Guy Smiley in those 2 sketches, which feels a little odd, but it just goes to show how much things were in flux in season 1 of Sesame Street, that they would be like, yeah, okay, you can be Guy Smiley today. I'll say he's never referred to as Guy Smiley, but he's a TV announcer and he looks identical to Guy Smiley. Muppet Wiki credits him just as Granny Fanny's announcer, so I have no other knowledge about him. Now, Kristi, this is going to be a weird deep cut question that you might actually know the answer to. Did you recognize the Granny Fanny Nesselrode puppet in the first 2 sketches?
So I ended up looking it up on Muppet Wiki.
Okay, so you do know.
Yeah, and it was, wasn't it like a Southern Colonel?
It's the Southern Colonel. It's the Southern Colonel who... So some Muppet fans, if you're a real, Hubba all-star, you might remember that the Southern Colonel was an early sort of ad character that Jim performed, like Wilkins and Wontkins, for the Southern Bread Company.
I'd do anything for Southern Bread. I'd even go to Yankee Stadium.
Let's murder the Yankees!
You know, I might even like it up here.
But I feel like where everybody knows the Southern Colonel from, because it goes around the internet all the time, or at least it used to. And I played a clip from this in episode 1 of this show, is the performance where Jim is demonstrating how anything Muppets can get their features changed and become other characters. That is the Southern kernel that he's using to demonstrate that with. And this demonstration starts with Jim saying, here's a character we have who's a Southern kernel.
We have a lot of fun playing with the character when we're developing a puppet. And we have here a Southern Colonel type character that he's worked similar to Ralph and some of our other characters. He's a two-person puppet. And in this one, I'm working the left hand and the head.
And I'm working the right hand.
Here's that sound.
That's right.
I've never really figured that out before. Son of a gun.
He can be anything because where he ended up was in Goat Corners, Michigan, as the answer lady.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Granny, I really like Jim Henson's performance of Granny Fanny Nesselrode.
Yeah.
I do want to say it is funny.
Yes. I have to admit, I kind of imprinted on this first version of Granny Fanny like a little duckling because she actually reminded me a lot of my paternal grandmother. Even like her, how the Southern Colonel puppet looks as Granny Fanny. That actually resembles my grandma quite a bit. And the cadence in Jim's voice, that kind of slower pace, and I kind of just ended up loving her a little bit.
So the idea is, I actually wrote in my notes that Granny is kind of like if Mr. Noodle could talk. Because the whole point is like, she gets asked a simple question like, Granny, what do you do when your dishes are dirty? And Granny's like,
Let me show you.
Yes.
I have found a very simple solution here. What you do is you just throw the dirty dishes away, you see? You just get rid of the dirty dish. When a dish gets dirty, you just throw it away, you see? Nothing to do with dirty dishes, but just throw them away, you see? And so that's the best way to do it, and you'll solve the problem in a big hurry, you see?
And the announcer needs to be like, no, Granny Fanny, you need to wash them.
I love her solution to sharpened pencil because it's especially her concern is that this sharpened pencil, it's so sharp you're going to hurt yourself on it, and so you have to snap off the tip so that you can't, I guess, potentially wound yourself on this pencil. One thing I really loved about that is that she specifically addresses the ladies out there with this pencil tip. That was such an odd choice, I thought.
You girls know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But, I do think it's interesting because it is clearly supposed to be like a women's TV show, right? Like, this would be the kind of thing that, like, housewives would watch, right? And I don't know a lot about this kind of TV show, whether it existed or not, but you get the sense that, like, helpful home tips, and it's talked about a lot in the book I was reading, but helpful home tips were the domain of women, where it's like commercials would be like, women, you know how you're always having problems with your toaster, et cetera, et cetera. It was always just assumed that, like, if it's house stuff, women are going to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
I think my problem with these sketches, these first two in particular, is they go on so long. In each one, Granny has to solve like 4 problems. And I'm like, there's a saying, you get in improv and stuff like that, like, too short to suck. Like, things are always things are always funnier when they're shorter,
Yeah.
I say that as someone who's recording, I don't know, multiple hour-and-a-half long podcast episodes on anything Muppets with wigs. But, it is definitely the case that, like, if it was just the pencil or just the dirty dishes, not only would there have wound up being more of these Granny Fanny sketches, but also they probably would have been funnier.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess they did learn from it because the later sketches do, for the most part, zero in on one specific problem that she has to solve.
Right. So that gets us into the sort of second set, where they redesign the granny puppet. She kind of looks like the Count. She's got like the Count base, but with an old woman wig, as opposed to this weird pink blob that is the Southern Colonel. And the announcer now doesn't look like Guy Smiley. I mean, looks a little like Guy Smiley because he's got the same head shape, but looks different than Guy Smiley. But most importantly, the announcer is now Jerry Nelson. But even odder is the fact that Granny Fanny is Carol Spinney in one of Carol's only other recurring characters other than Big Bird and Oscar.
He's got range, I guess.
Granny Fanny Nesselrode. I think Carol's Granny Fanny is a little more annoying.
Yeah.
And also feels a little less intelligent.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I really liked that first Granny, that iteration of her. And so seeing this second version, it felt like an imposter has taken over. She's very energetic. I almost feel like she feels less like a real grandma to me, but that is, again, based on my perception of my own grandma and how she would act. But Granny Fanny, her zooming around that little set of theirs, it doesn't feel. I like the slower pace of Jim's Granny.
That's amazing. You see, I have the same problem.
You do?
Oh, yes, indeedy so. I have 2 little kittens, and they look so much alike, I can't tell them apart. Oh,
well, my goodness.
And Jim does come back and perform Granny one more time in the telephone sketch. But yeah, Carol's is a little zanier.
Yeah. And also her solutions actually start to make sense, although she's missing an obvious problem, like with the kitten sketch. She's talking about trying to solve the problem of, I have 2 kittens and they're indistinguishable. How do I tell these kittens apart? And her solution is to propose getting them 2 different collars, which makes a lot of sense. That's a very sensible solution, Granny. But then the announcer points out, well, Granny, actually, these kittens are distinguishable. There's a gray one and there's an orange one. So I don't know, that almost felt like a little strange with the setup of the previous shorts that for some reason, I'm adhering to so strictly. This is the Granny Fanny canon. I cannot deviate from this now.
I'm picturing you, and Anthony Strand did an article. I need to find it. I don't remember the title, but Anthony Strand once did an article where he pretended to be a Sesame Street viewer to the premiere episode of season 2 of Sesame Street and complaining about all of the changes that had been made. Like, what is this new performer, Jerry Nelson, and what is he doing on my show? So I'm picturing you, Kristi, like going on social media and like doing hashtag not my Nesselrode. Like,
honestly, kind of. Like, I liked the Southern Colonel's face shape for Granny Fanny. I don't know, I kind of like that more angular, the bigger jaw. Like, she kind of felt more unique.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is because again, the second redesign is just the Count. It's the lavender live hand anything Muppet, the same as Count or Mumford.
Yeah. And even when you think of a stereotypical grandma in cartoons, a lot of the times they have that same kind of style of hair with the bun,
yeah,
the glasses. Yeah, not my Granny Fanny.
Not your Granny Fanny. It is interesting, though, and I mentioned this. The second of Carol's Granny Fanny sketches is the one where Granny claims that how she remembers the alphabet is that she has a bag that has everything that starts with a different letter of the alphabet in it. That sketch was confusing because she doesn't do the whole alphabet, and then at one point stops doing the letters in order. which was confusing and concerning to me.
Hey,
Careful there, Granny.
An umbrella, and that's a U word.
Yeah, my goodness, that box must be pretty heavy, Granny.
Of course, I have my tree, and that's a T word. Here it is.
I say, careful there, Granny. Look out now. Look out there, Granny.
I'm just gonna set it down.
Careful.
There. Oh, isn't that nice?
Well, that's all the time we have for today, folks. Be sure to tune in. Tune in next week.
Hey, wanna hear my horn? Here we go.
We're going to put a pin in that because, as we'll see in Granny's surprisingly long life, having a bag with many things in it becomes Granny's predominant character trait for a period there, which is kind of weird. And then, of course, the only other one worth noting, as we did, is that she does appear on Here Is Your Life Oak Tree, which is a Guy Smiley sketch, this time the real Guy Smiley. She's in it for probably about 45 seconds.
Yeah.
Does not indicate anything. It is clear that they just wanted an old woman and decided that they were going to use Granny Fanny and refer to her as Granny Fanny. They probably just could have not, and then no one would be talking about this sketch on my podcast.
And she was kind of upstaged, too, by that oak tree puppet. That was a great puppet.
That was a great puppet, although it was deeply concerning when the table and chair showed up, and they were like, we're a table and a chair! We used to be your friends!
Oh, God.
But the thing about Granny Fanny is while there were no new Granny Fanny sketches made after 1972, Granny continued to appear in books through 1986. There was a 14-year period where you could see Granny Fanny in books, but not on the show Sesame Street. She also, and I don't have as much information on Sesame Street Live, but friend of the pod, Tony Whitaker, was letting me know that she did appear in various Sesame Street Live shows for a while, again, up through the 80s. This character who, again, no one remembers, because how could any of us remember this character who didn't appear in any new stuff after 1972?
I guess it's like you said, though, is that when you need a grandma puppet, you pull out Granny Fanny.
But that's less true of books. You know, like, and that's what's interesting to me, is like, there was something that someone liked about Granny Fanny or felt obligated to use about Granny Fanny. You know, well, let's talk about some of these books. So there's an appearance in 1974's Big Bird's Busy Book, where she is on a Guy Smiley game show with Harry Monster, looking for something that starts with the letter D. And Kristi, how does Granny try to solve this problem?
She pulls out her purse and she starts digging through, looking for things that start with the letter D.
So it's that joke, and I'm like, okay, I get why you used Granny Fanny here, because we've established Granny's thing is that she has a purse.
Yes, this is an appropriate use of the Sesame Street canon, the
Yes.
lore.
Exactly. I gave it 2 thumbs up on my Letterboxd review of picture books in 1974. Kristi, do you have this problem with your purse? Because you know what? I can kind of relate to Granny Fanny.
Yeah. See, and I'm kind of anti-purse.
No kidding.
Yeah, I'm one of those people, I need to have my items in a specific pocket so that I could tell by weight if I have them or not. So I'm more of a pocket or a pouch person, not a big purse person.
The problem is, like, dresses don't usually have pockets, and I usually wear dresses.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Anyway, so yeah, I can relate to Granny Fanny. Then she shows up the same year in the bizarrely titled See No Evil, Hear No Evil, Smell No Evil, Scratch and Sniff book. Surprisingly prominent role trying to solve the problem of the stinky clubhouse. Kristi, how does Granny try to solve this problem?
She, once again, she pulls out her bag and starts going through the contents. Yeah, you know what? I didn't think about it until you pointed it out, but yeah, there's a lot of bag-related stuff here.
We see her show up colored the wrong color in the Sesame Street Family album. We see her show up in Spanish in Una Sorpresa. She shows up in the Sesame Street cookbook, helping Betty Lou make some kind of television food. She's on the cover of 3 different coloring books in the late 70s.
I didn't notice that she was on the cover.
Nope, she is on the cover of 3 coloring books.
Someone really was a Granny Fanny fan.
Let's take a quick look, though, at from around the same period, the Sesame Street film strips, which were a series of film strips in 1976 distributed to schools. The idea is that they were semi-interactive film strips. So for the younger kids in the audience, and by that I mean people Kristi and my age, because Kristi, were they showing film strips when you were in grade school? No.
No,
we had
no.
we had a VCR. Like we had the VCR on a cart, that they would bring around.
The big giant CRT TV.
Yeah.
Perched upon the high cart.
When it was time for me to watch Jack and the Beanstalk, the real story in my elementary school music class, which we absolutely did. I have vivid memory of watching Brian Henson's Jack and the Beanstalk, the real story. They would bring that CRT around. But film strips were, simpler. It was literally just like a projector that would show still images, and there would be an audio track that you would have to sync up separately and would play along. So in this case, you've got still images of the Sesame Street characters and an audio track that would play and would indicate when it was time for the teacher to change the slide. And there's some cases, too, in the 4th of July one that we'll talk about in a second, where the film strip tells the teacher to stop and okay, now let's discuss. So Kristi, let's discuss. Granny shows up in 2 of these, and in neither of them does she really have any of the traits we've come to sort of establish for Granny Fanny Nesselrode.
No, not at all. The Ernie Learns to Skate one actually was... I really liked her character in it, but yeah, she felt like a completely different person there.
So I guess we'll start with Ernie Learns to Skate. Ernie Learns to Skate is a film strip about Ernie. I know I told you to jump in the middle because I was like, don't waste your time on the beginning. But Ernie is being bullied at the park for not knowing how to ice skate. And Granny sees him, struggling to skate. And she offers him some really good advice. Look, you gotta keep trying, you gonna just give up and cry about it? Or are you gonna, yeah.
Oh, fiddlesticks, you're giving up too soon, and I won't allow it.
Well, I don't care. I'm angry.
No, you listen to me. If you want to have a temper tantrum, you just go off by yourself. It hurts my ears.
Oh, I'm sorry, Granny. I wasn't mad at you.
I know you weren't. But Bert and I are trying to help you.
That's right.
You've got to cooperate. Now, put your skates back on.
That's kind of what I liked about her, is that she, she is trying to encourage him, but she's also got a bit of an edge to her still. Like when Ernie starts having a bit of a temper tantrum, she very quickly tells him, you're not going to be doing that in front of me. You're going to calm down and you're going to try again. And she's, telling him about how, you don't become a champion skater overnight. Even the best skaters still fall every so often. It's all very sensible advice from someone who we previously see struggle to get ketchup out of a bottle because she forgot to take the lid off.
Dating's a lot easier than pouring ketchup, let me tell you. No, I'm kidding. But it is a really nice character, and it's Jerry Nelson here doing a kind of, I mean, Jerry Nelson had like 1,000 voices, but also you can picture all of Jerry Nelson's voices. Somehow those are both true. It's a kind of old lady Jerry Nelson voice. If you're picturing what Jerry Nelson would sound like as an old lady, you're picturing it correct. Also, I've already played an audio clip because that's how my podcast works. Again, I really liked her, but just like, it's not necessarily Granny Fanny. And at this point, it isn't acting like Granny Fanny. It also isn't sounding like Granny Fanny. I don't understand why they didn't just make up another character. Like, it's so strange that they specifically chose this character for a film strip. It's not even like it's, well, we had this puppet lying around. It's like, well, you could have drawn anyone. Could have been Harry Monster teaching Ernie how to skate if you only had Jerry Nelson in the studio.
Yeah. I guess it's maybe the trope of the wise old woman, you know, coming in, dispense her wisdom.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But again, I loved it. I really liked this character, even if it is so different than the Granny Fanny who doesn't seem to realize that one of her cats is orange and one of her cats is gray.
Mm-hmm.
Despite not being colorblind, like you can't even use that excuse because she does realize eventually. Anyway, now, Kristi, the 4th of July one was probably very confusing to you. Because the 4th of July is a holiday that we have here in America.
Oh, okay. So we have it a little different here. We celebrate the 1st of July, you know.
This is weird. First of all, Granny is performed by Richard Hunt here. Second of all, Granny's thing is that she's excited to be playing Betsy Ross on the 4th of July float, and she wants the float to be painted turquoise with a little bit of purple mixed in.
Well, that's just the thing I came to see you about. I've been making my Betsy Ross costume, you know, and it's almost finished.
Oh, you're gonna make a super Betsy Ross, Granny. I could just see you now, riding on the float and sewing the first American flag.
Ah, yes, it will be quite a thrill. Now, I wanted to tell you about the color the float should be painted. I think it should match my costume, sort of a violet with just a hint of turquoise. Won't that be lovely?
Which is called brown.
I didn't think of that. I was just picturing it.
You can't mix those colors. Like... You can't mix them. They don't mix. What was your thought on Granny Fanny in this? Did you have a thought on Granny Fanny in this? I truly have no opinions about this 4th of July film strip.
I mean, again, like, she is just kind of a different character here, it feels. Like, she very picky about the color of the float. She kind of does this is maybe another stereotype of old people, is that they have opinions and they believe their opinions are the correct ones. I mean, she doesn't get totally nasty about it, but she is very insistent that this parade float needs to be turquoise with a hint of violet.
It is interesting, though, you know, because she's fighting with Biff, who wants the float to be float colored, which is brown, according to Biff. Which again is what turquoise plus purple would, if you mix those colors together, you'd probably get brown. So maybe they should have but what's interesting is that this is like a really childish argument between two Sesame Street characters who are like 100% indisputably supposed to be adults.
Yeah, and the argument is solved by Big Bird, who, I forget, canonically he's like 7?
6.
6?
Yeah, he's 6. But also the kids at home, because this is where Big Bird is like, okay, you can pause the tape, you know, and talk it over. And he tells them that they should compromise. And I'm like, oh, so like turquoise and brown stripes? And he's like, no, we're going to compromise by making it red, white, and blue. And I'm like, well, that's just what you want, Big Bird. That's not...
I'm going to try that from now on if I'm in an argument. Let's compromise by doing things my way.
We move from there into, like I said, 3 coloring books where Granny Fanny appears on the cover in different vehicles. She's on a unicycle in one of them. Oh, she's knitting while on a unicycle in the From Here to There coloring book. So yeah, this enters a strange era for Granny Fanny where suddenly her things become, well, two things, vehicles and fitness. Because in the late 70s, early 80s, everything I could find of Granny Fanny involved her on a unicycle or in a helicopter or driving a school bus, or swimming in the ocean, or going for a jog.
She's got an impressive range of hobbies and driver's licenses.
But again, now we're completely away from what was established as Granny Fanny.
I mean, I would like to think of her as a helicopter pilot. Well, that's kind of rad.
I mean, that's the thing is like, should I be complaining that this character is well-rounded? But I guess I don't feel like I really know Granny Fanny.
No, it very much just feels like somebody had a big folder or a big book of all the available Sesame Street characters, and they would flip through it and they landed on the Granny Fanny page and thought, okay, I'll draw this one into the book.
That is absolutely what it feels like. You know, it is interesting though, because again, going back to our discussion of tropes from earlier, no, the helicopter pilot is admittedly not a trope. And it is interesting that Granny Fanny did become a helicopter pilot. I can say that that is not something discussed in any of the theory I was reading. But we are here at the kind of spinster slash widower, or widow character rather, spinster character. It's also worth noting that, you know, one of the things the book talks a lot about, like I was saying, is the idea that like a woman's space is in the home. And women were not usually portrayed on TV as having jobs. And we do have Granny Fanny having presumably a job here, but Granny's job is the home. Granny's job is teaching other people about the home. And again, like these helpful home tips for ladies. And again, that fits right into these tropes here where it's like, of course, the old lady character is going to share friendly tips about home. That is what an old lady does. And it isn't until she just starts making cameos in picture books that we start to see more of her than that. You know, unicycling and helicopters and swimming in the ocean. But that's not really the character that was portrayed in the bulk of what you would assume people were seeing.
Yeah, and again, and it doesn't feel like it's a purposeful decision to make Granny have these activities as hobbies. Again, it just feels like somebody wanted to draw an old grandma character and decided to put her in.
But she sticks around. 1981, she's in the Sesame Street Circus of Opposites, alongside Rodeo Rosie, who we'll be talking about in 2 weeks on this show. I guess that's a spoiler, but we'll be talking about Rodeo Rosie in 2 weeks. And this is also this is really interesting because this book, Sesame Street Circus of Opposites, first book to feature Elmo. So it's a real changing of the guards here, where Granny Fanny is leaving us just as Elmo is entering. And I gotta say, I get why Elmo was a more popular character than Granny Fanny Nesselrode.
Aw, I'm sorry, Granny. One day people will accept you like I accept you.
And then the final appearance of Granny Fanny ever was in a magazine story from 1986, a Sesame Street holiday story, Grover's Gift.
Oh, okay. That's a nice one to end it on, I guess.
Can you talk a little bit? Did you read Grover's Gift? I know I shared with you some scans from it.
Yeah, so it's essentially the Gift of the Magi story. With but this time with Big Bird and Cookie Monster, who want to get gifts for each other. Granny Fanny has a store that sells custom T-shirts for teddy bears, and so which is such a specific.
But it also sells other things because she's teaching Grover how to make latkes there, right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
So it also sells potatoes?
Like, yeah, well, you gotta diversify a little bit. teddy bear t-shirts and latkes. But so so Cookie Monster he trades his jar of cookies for a t-shirt for Radar, and then Big Bird trades Radar for, I think it was a cookie jar. Sorry, yes, he trades the cookie jar for Radar. And then at the very end, Grover comes in and he gifts them the gifts that they traded into Granny.
It's interesting because it really feels like Granny Fanny is supposed to be Mr. Hooper in this.
Yeah.
Especially, have you seen Christmas Eve on Sesame Street?
It's been a long time. So
okay.
I
well, no.
remember.
It's okay. I'm not here to judge anyone for what they have or haven't seen. But one of the famous scenes from that is a Gift of the Magi retelling with Bert and Ernie. Bert sells his paper clips to Mr. Hooper to buy a soap dish for Ernie. Ernie sells Rubber Ducky to Mr. Hooper to buy a box for Bert's paper clips. And again, you've got this idea of Granny Fanny as a kindly store owner on Sesame Street. This also seems to suggest, as I said, that Granny Fanny Nesselrode is Jewish. And as a Jewish woman, I wanna welcome Granny Fanny to the family. Thank you, Granny. But again, you once again feel like this is just we chose a character out of a bag. Why is it Granny Fanny? And by this point, again, we are 14 years removed from new Granny Fanny sketches.
Yeah, and she's still showing up. You know what I love the most about this story is that I thought it was building to a conclusion where Granny Fanny comes in and she gives Cookie Monster and Big Bird their respective treasures back, and she says something about the meaning of Christmas, but no, that's Grover that comes in. So Granny Fanny was totally fine holding on to Radar and Cookie Monster's cookies.
Kristi, I am so glad you pointed this out because Granny Fanny, in my notes, I wrote, she is a less nice Mr. Hooper. Because in Christmas Eve on Sesame Street, it ends with Mr. Hooper showing up in Bert and Ernie's apartment and being like, I wanted to give you guys your paper clips and Rubber Ducky. Granny is just fine with it. And presumably Grover had to buy these things back from Granny?
Yeah, I think so. Granny Fanny probably just forgot, because that's also that would be more character.
You know what? That's it. She suddenly reverted back to season 1 Granny Fanny. She forgot. She was so busy picking up specks of dust with a tweezer and putting them into her dust jar. Anything else to say about Granny Fanny?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I guess I was surprised by how much that I came to love her. Again, that is based on her resemblance to my paternal grandma. Even her forgetfulness is very much something my grandma did. So I came into this podcast not knowing who Granny Fanny was, and now I think I might be one of her only fans.
But not her only fans.
No, never.
So I want to talk about one final character today, because we're going to spend probably all of 2 minutes talking about this character. So as I said, Granny Fanny, Roosevelt Franklin's mom, and Betty Lou, who we talked about in our second episode, were the only recurring named female Muppets on season 1 of Sesame Street. The only other one who could potentially fall into this bowl, this bucket, I guess is a better word for it, is Little Bird.
Why are you barking at me?
Oh, I thought maybe you were some kind of little dog,
Well, I'm not a dog.
Oh.
Cheep, cheep. Cheep, cheep.
But Little Bird isn't female. I need to stress this. Little Bird was only female sometimes. It was some writing confusion, most likely. Fran Brill, who started performing Little Bird in season 2, said that she always intended Little Bird to be a boy. He doesn't get referred to as a girl until later in the 70s. So he doesn't count, but just in case somebody at home is like, well, what about Little Bird? No, Little Bird doesn't count. Season 2, as we discussed last week on this show, is when Fran Brill joins the show. And Fran Brill takes over performing Betty Lou. And in season 2, she'll also get her own character named Prairie Dawn. But shortly after she gets Prairie Dawn, Fran Brill gets a character named after Fran Brill, Franny. And Franny asks, what if Prairie Dawn was kind of boring?
Hey, Franny, you've been learning about all different kinds of musical instruments today, haven't you?
Oh, yeah, I sure have.
The glasses that Gordon had, right?
Right.
And the recorder.
Oh, yeah, that was neat. He made that out of a pipe.
Yeah, and an old broomstick.
Right.
Do you know how to make a kazoo?
A kazoo? No, I know what it is. It's another instrument.
That's right.
How can you make one?
Kind of boring and sort of just sometimes mumbled to herself a little bit or gets talked over.
Yeah. So I should just say, before we get into the one Franny episode we're going to discuss, Franny is a green anything Muppet, so looking kind of like Lefty the Salesman or Sherlock Hemlock, except she literally has Prairie Dawn's wig. It is the same wig, presumably, that they put on Prairie Dawn, and she wears a dress and is a soft-spoken little girl who appeared in 3 episodes of season 2 of Sesame Street. Now, I mentioned we only watched 1, and that's because 2 of her 3 appearances are what we refer to as the lost episodes of Sesame Street. You can read more about this on Muppet Wiki, but there are some episodes that even Muppet Wiki does not have access to, and 2 of those 3 feature Franny. So we can only talk about 1 episode from March 12th, 1971. Again, in season 2, it is Music Day, and Franny is kind of mumbly and gets talked over. I don't love it.
As someone who is kind of awkward, I kind of loved Franny, specifically because she got talked over, and she just kind of haunts the background of the episode.
The funniest thing, the clip that I sent you, so the episode is about Gordon and Gordon's friend the carpenter, who we previously talked about in our second episode on Betty Lou as helping Betty Lou build a box. But Gordon and Gordon's carpenter friend are teaching the kids how to make musical instruments. And fun fact, this is the episode that the song What Makes Music, that would later be featured on one of the Sesame Street disco albums, is from.
What makes music? Anything makes music. When you're happy on the inside, everything you hear is music.
But Franny doesn't sing What Makes Music, so I didn't send you that. Franny kind of just stands around and makes suggestions of what to do, gets talked over, gets explained how to make a kazoo too. But in the clip that I sent you, it literally begins with Franny going,
How about
and a couple
row, row
others
your
that
boat?
you've never heard before, huh?
Row,
Oh, no,
row your
no.
boat?
Look, wait a minute. Just play the alphabet song, right?
Yeah, just no. And that kind of gave me, out of all the videos that you sent me, that absolutely was the biggest laugh of the night for me.
Gordon goes, no, we already did the alphabet song. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. I get the sense, and I'd love to follow up with some of the Wiki team who has access to some of the early scripts, but I get the sense a lot of this was ad-libbed.
Oh,
and
yeah, absolutely.
that is absolutely how it feels, where, like, Fran Brill was like, oh, I'll have my character suggest a song, too. And just, like, Gordon wasn't ready and, like, knew there wasn't time to do it, so it was just like, no.
No. Just shoots her down mercilessly.
But there's not much else to say. She's not a character who lasted. She's kind of boring. We're gonna, we're gonna take a whole episode next week to talk about some early Prairie Dawn stuff. But I wanted to knock out Franny because technically she counts as a recurring female character, a recurring female Muppet. And I was like, well, the exposition has to go somewhere.
What if we're missing some absolute gold in those lost episodes though, that completely redeem her character?
Well, Kristi, I got good news for you.
Oh.
I have descriptions.
Okay.
So I'm gonna read you these descriptions and you're gonna tell me if they sound like gold. Okay. Episode 231, March 30th, 1971. Franny comes to Hooper's store to run an errand for her mother, ordering 7 plastic coffee cups. She does a quick errand around the corner while Mr. Hooper puts them in a box. When Franny returns, she doesn't think that all the cups fit into the box, but Mr. Hooper assures her that there are still 7 by counting them. Franny asks to have them placed back in the box, then again can't believe they all fit. Mr. Hooper senses this is going to go on for a while. Kristi, did we miss gold?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. In my head, I could see if I could picture Mr. Hooper getting madder and madder and madder, and that would make me laugh a lot.
Okay, now here's another one, and I forgot to write down this episode number, so I apologize. But Franny comes to Mr. Hooper's to buy 2 dollies. Mr. Hooper has 4 dollies, and Franny can't decide which ones to buy. She's able to classify them into many groups of potential purchase, such as size or skin color. She finally decides to get the 2 dollies wearing overalls, but tells Mr. Hooper to hold off on wrapping them until her birthday in 3 months. Okay, that's funny.
I like that. Yeah. I wish we were talking about that episode.
Well, I do not have access to that episode, and believe me, I ask the Wiki team. I thank them in every episode. Yeah. They could not help me access the episode where Franny buys 2 dollies.
Alas. Maybe one day.
Anything else you want to say about Franny? Do you want to list dolls you have access to on your desk?
I mean, I've got Magna Anjumon from Digimon.
No kidding. Any other thoughts on any of these 3 characters? Our Granny, Fanny, Nesselrode, and Friends episode?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on this.
Thank you so much for being on this, Kristi. It's truly such a pleasure. I always love hanging out. And again, I figured, if I was gonna send the clips anyway, I could send them to someone who doesn't know Granny Fanny Nesselrode.
Well, I'm glad I know her now.
Kristi, do you have anything you'd like to plug for the audience?
I guess if you just want to check out my Muppet Princess Bride illustrations or my Labyrinth prop replicas, you could feel free to check me out. I'm on Instagram, Tumblr, Blue Sky, a couple other places, but those are the main ones. And I'm there as KO Makes Things.
Kristi, do you also want to plug your podcast, or does that go in a separate sphere?
Oh man. Okay. Well, if you want to see the unfiltered, usually me after having just chugged a 7-Up, Kristi, yes, I do have a podcast that I host with my friend Bree, and we talk about bad princess movies, basically just any goofy, silly movie, sometimes good ones, that feature a princess we like to chat about and have a silly time. So that is just the Bad Princess Movies podcast. I do swear a lot on it, just gonna say, because I feel like a lot of the ToughPigs podcasts, I don't think you guys swear a lot, and I definitely swear a bunch on my podcast.
We don't. It's like one thing that we've kind of all agreed not to do. That doesn't mean that, you guys aren't allowed to on your podcast. I don't know. It's just something, it just feels weird. Like, I'm doing a show about Bear in the Big Blue House. It feels like maybe I should.
You're not.
Anyway, Kristi, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for all of your help on all of our Pride Month stuff. We're recording this shortly after Pride Month, so thank you for that. And I'm glad I gave you a new favorite Muppet character. Season 1, Granny Fanny Nesselrode.
Thank you.
And there you have it. Between this episode and our earlier ones, now you know everything about every single recurring female Muppet who appeared in Season 1 of Sesame Street, plus Franny from Season 2. And that's it, you know? Season 1 brought us Betty Lou, who might not be a character at all, Granny Fanny, who's fun but doesn't last, Roosevelt's mother, who only exists as a mother. In Season 1, we'd also meet Big Bird's grandmother, Granny Bird, but she's only in one episode in Season 1, so we'll talk more about her later on. For now, I want to remind you just how dire this is when compared to the classic, unforgettable male characters introduced in this season. Ernie, Bert, Big Bird, Oscar, Guy Smiley, Cookie Monster. It's not that the writers and performers and builders of Season 1 couldn't make strong characters, but when it came to women and girls, audiences had extremely little, causing a strange, symbolic annihilation of many types of women. Which takes us to Season 2. As we discussed last week, Fran Brill joined the show in Season 2. At first, she'd mostly play Betty Lou. But in 1971, she began playing a second pink little girl. And well, it's kind of shocking how quickly that character developed into someone special.
That's a very long word you're spelling there. You got a lot of letters, little girl. You know that?
Yes, well, it is moderately extensive.
Moderately extensive. Very heavy talk.
Next week on A Prairie Dawn Companion, I talk about Prairie Dawn in the 1970s with a very special guest. I hope you're all pageant ready. See you soon.
I really am quite remarkable.
A Prairie Dawn Companion is a production of ToughPigs.com. It is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Becca Petunia, and executive produced by the ToughPigs Muppet Fan Podcast executive producer, Joe Hennes. Thanks to Scott Hanson, Shane Keating, Tony Whitaker, and the whole Muppet Wiki team for helping me with research. The book Street Gang by Michael Davis was also indispensable. Thanks to Katilyn Miller, Michal Richardson, and Eli Lee for help with script revisions. Follow ToughPigs on social media. You can support us on Patreon or by buying a t-shirt on our TeePublic. Join the conversation on the ToughPigs Discord. You can support A Prairie Dawn Companion and lots of other podcasts too by giving Muppet Fan Podcasts with ToughPigs.com 5 stars on your podcast reviewing app of choice.
Got a stuffed rhinoceros here, too.